This video was great. I'm going to link to it. This guy, well, I guess that guy. I'll talk about that anyway. This guy put together. There's a whole bunch of things that I've been thinking about over the last several years in particular, and he distilled it down really into 7 minutes or so of a YouTube video. Really worth watching. This is on the topic of social media, addiction to phones and phone content, and that idea, of you're sitting around in a line or whatever, and it's almost like you can't even stand there for a moment and just be. You have to grab your phone and distract yourself, kind of thing. We're all going through this, right? To some degree or another. Essentially everyone on the planet, practically at this point, I think, but certainly in America, is going through this sort of thing right now where, and we have been for a long time, where the phone has become such an addiction to us that we can't be bored, we can't sit and think, we can't be alone, we can't, and we're all here, right? And in some cases, sometimes you feel pretty good about it. You stand in the line, you think to yourself, if you've been around long enough, you think to yourself, oh man, like 20, 30 years ago, I couldn't have just pulled out my phone and entertained myself while I stood in the line. This sure made the last 30 minutes of standing in the DMV line or whatever a lot more tolerable. But it's not just there, right? It's everywhere. So anyway, that's what this video is on the topic of. He sort of starts the video by talking about drawing a parallel between cocaine addiction and social media, phone content addiction kind of thing. I'm not sure I buy into this. I get his point. His point is really that the same chemicals in your brain that get released through an activity like cocaine are the same chemicals that get released essentially as you're scrolling through social media and other such things. That's true. However, I would argue that it's a little bit of I'm not sure what the logical fallacy is. I'm not sure if it's a straw man or something else, but a little bit off where, sure, that might be, but I think that one activity is a lot more dangerous than the other. So drawing such a direct parallel is a little disingenuous, but that's okay. We'll just put that aside for a second. The overall point of this video is that all of this is intentional. Right. If you've ever felt that thing where you're like, I just wasted 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 2 hours, whatever, scrolling through your phone. Part of the point of this video is to say, and I think this is one of the best points that he makes in this thing. Well, let me back up a second. If you've ever tried to go through a quote unquote digital detox, or maybe you've quit social media only to go back to it or whatever, like a lot of us have done this sort of thing where it's like, oh, I'm done with, pick your service, Instagram. And then a week later, you're back, right? And you justify that to yourself or whatever. And you say, well, it's to do this or keep in touch with that or, whatever. It's not actually your fault. You're probably trying to willpower your way through it. I'm just going to put it down and not look at it and not touch it, right? Here's the problem. You're one person trying to exhibit willpower and try to make that change your behavior. On the other end of that service, whatever that service is, or those services, or whatever it is that you find is difficult to break away from, there are thousands of people who have studied behavior and behavioral manipulation and behavioral tactics and all sorts of things, whose entire job, probably their six-figure job, is to find ways to keep you on that thing. And I hope this is one of the best points that he makes along the way here. And actually, this piece of things, maybe part of why I thought this was so interesting was that this is one thing I hadn't thought of. Just this idea that you're placing a bet that your willpower is stronger than thousands of people whose job it is to break your willpower. Think about that in a different light, right? How long do you think you would hold up to torture? Like you get you're I don't know, you're a spy and you get captured and you're being held and they're trying to get information from you or whatever, whatever movie scene you want to think about. How long do you think realistically it would be before you break? and tell them whatever they want to hear to make the pain stop or whatever. This isn't that far off from that. There are thousands of people who are trained at finding ways to break you and make sure that you stay on their platform because they need your attention in order to make money. That's, at the end of the day, all of these things that are quote unquote free, and even a lot of the ones these days that aren't, they need your attention. You need to not go outside. You need to not put your phone down. You need to not ever forget your phone. Oh, God forbid you go for an errand and don't have your phone on you. You need to make sure that any line you stand on, it's close by. You need to make sure that every time you go to the bathroom, you're on your phone. Just all of the attention all the time. Never put it down. It's never far from reach. It's never far from your grasp. And they need that. They need all that time from you in order to make money. I don't know. I always kind of said to myself, it's one of the reasons I don't trust, car salesmen or really any kind of salesman. If your job is directly dependent on me buying a thing from you, your motivation is already slanted in a direction that I'm not comfortable with. And that's exactly how this is, except it's vying for your attention. But he makes a whole bunch of really good points. And what I like about this video is he doesn't just go through all of the wrongs and oh my God and make you feel helpless. There is a solution in here. He presents a solution. And I think it's a pretty solid one. Essentially, the general idea is that next time you're going to go and grab for your phone and scroll for half an hour or whatever, why don't you try making something instead? Some sort of creativity, some sort of creative exercise, whatever that means to you. And I could make a pretty broad definition of that, right? Go, I don't know, if you're a tech guy, go code something. Or if you like to cook, maybe you go cook something. I don't know. Make something. You like to draw, pick up pad and paper, draw something, like whatever. But the idea is, and he kind of puts a challenge out there for the next 90 days, for 3 months, essentially. And every time you're about to grab your phone to just kind of distract yourself or look at things or veer into apps or whatever, instead, do something creative. Make something. Produce something. Doesn't matter what it is. Anything. Pick, I don't know, knit, like whatever. Whatever it is that you like to make or do or you find creative, do that instead. And the idea is that over the course of 90 days, it's one of the few things that can kind of break this routine. He does go into some of the psychology about it. Anyway, I found it to be a really interesting video. It both presents the problem well and suggests a solution in a very accessible way. And I think content like that is pretty scarce these days. A lot of videos either present a very thin argument of a problem, or the solutions, quote unquote, are pretty superficial and really just doled out over the course of a 20-minute video to, once again, keep your eyeballs on the video. This was succinct. It made a lot of sense. It presented a solution. It doesn't pull any punches. It doesn't waste your time. So I'll link to it in the description. It's definitely worth a watch, I would say.
The last thing I want to mention is that when you study psychology, you end up studying behavioral psychology quite a bit along the way, particularly in the beginning of things. And one of the big concepts that you come across is operant conditioning. So this is punishments and rewards and that kind of stuff that, to change people's behavior. Within that sub-discipline of things, there is one type of reinforcement that's particularly strong for people. It has to do with the schedule. So the idea is, this is your slot machine. So the idea being, when you receive rewards, but you can't predict when they're going to happen, it tends to reinforce that behavior very strongly. So the idea of the slot machine being you put in a quarter, you pull that lever, you don't know if you're going to win or not. So then you're encouraged to do it again and again and again and again. And you start playing games in your head where, well, I've pulled this 100 times, I've pulled this 500 times, I'm bound to win eventually. But that type of schedule is called random interval reinforcement. So the idea is that there is some interval to it, but the interval is completely random. You could win twice in a row. You could never win. You could win once and then have to wait 500 more pulls. Doesn't matter. And the infinite scroller is a particularly devious version of this. As you are scrolling through content, I'm sure this sounds familiar. As you're scrolling through, think of like a TikTok kind of thing. You're scrolling one piece of content at a time. What do you figure? 90, 95, maybe more % of what you see is completely useless, pointless, and you would have been fine without seeing it. Some portion of it is probably ads. But then every now and then you do hit something that's either particularly funny or particularly amusing or particularly interesting or, actually does carry a decent... Like, I'm not saying that nothing out there is worth consuming. There are things that are genuinely good content. The problem is they're buried amongst a bunch of crap. And the infinite scroller is a particularly devious implementation, in my opinion, of a random interval reinforcement system. It very much encourages you to keep scrolling, whether you realize it or not, because you never know when you're going to hit something good. And your brain never knows. Your brain wants that. It wants the next dopamine hit, the next hit that makes it feel good or interested or whatever. And when it doesn't, when you can't say with any kind of certainty whether or not the almighty algorithm that sits behind any one of these things is going to feed you something you like, you are very inclined to keep scrolling. And for those of you who were around in the earlier days of social media, talk about like Twitter, when you just saw everything chronologically, think about what the newest stuff was on top. Think about how much less time you probably spent on those platforms. You log into Twitter, particularly in the early days, maybe you only had a handful of friends on there or whatever, and you look and you see, and 3 posts down was the latest update that you saw maybe an hour ago. So you read 3 quick posts and you move on with your life. You're like, well, nothing new. You go on. These algorithms don't exist for your benefit. They exist because it keeps you on the platform. If the new stuff is always at the top, it's very easy for you to keep track of what you have and haven't seen. It's not because of the quantity of people's friends or the quantity of this or making it easier or better anything. None of that. It's simply to keep you on longer. So anyway, if any of this stuff sounds familiar or you want to just see like a succinct summary, which is less than the length of this episode that I've been talking about it. It's only like 6 or 7 minutes. The link is in the description or the show notes or whatever. Take a look at it. Definitely was worth a watch for me. It just summed a lot of this stuff up really, again, succinctly from my point of view. So check it out. If you ever are interested in just thinking more about what's really going on and how to really move away from some of this screen and content and entertainment addiction that really we've all succumbed to some degree or another.